Hey, what's up? This is Ahia from Cover Me Chic. I'm going to walk you through how to make the Aziza tunic. You can hit the link below for the pattern. Let's get to it. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for new videos. And if you have any questions, ask in the comments. So here are all the supplies we need for the Aziza tunic. I have 3 yards of rayon from LA Finch, a ½ yard of 2-inch wide elastic that I'm going to cut in half for the cuff, the button for the closure on the back, scissors of course to cut out the fabric, the PDF pattern that I had printed at a copy shop, pins, and also the fuse for the collar. So let's get started. I have my PDF pattern. It comes in 2 sheets if you get it printed at a Staples or any type of copy shop. So what you do is you have to take your measurements, and based on your measurements you cut out the size of your pattern. This is the front and back. On the second page you have your sleeve, collar, and cuff. So look on the pattern and find out your size and then cut out the correct size. So now that I have my pattern pieces cut out, there are 5 altogether. You have the cuff, which you're going to fold, so you only cut 2 of these. You have the collar, which you cut 2 of the fabric and 1 of the fuse. The sleeve, you cut 2. The front, you cut 1 on a fold. And the back, you cut 2. So now we're going to lay it out on 60-inch wide fabric. You can find the layout of the fabric for 60 inches wide and 45 inches wide in the Aziza tunic instructions. So I'm cutting out the pattern pieces. Just a quick note to make sure that you snip the notches where you see them. And also for the cuff, there are circle dots where you should stop sewing, so you should clip those too. Just about 1/4 inch so that you know where to stop sewing. I usually like to snip the front on the fold so I know that I'm lining up the collar and at the same point where it's supposed to be. So I just snip all of my notches. So you do that for every pattern piece. So here again, I clipped the circle up here so I know where to put it on the seam, and all of the notches here and at the bottom, and also all the notches on the collar. So with the collar, you cut 2 pieces of the fabric and also 1 piece of fuse. So now we have all of our pattern pieces here. It's time to get sewing up. So before we get started, you should fuse one side of the collar. So this side is fused and this side isn't. So I stay stitched the collar, 2 rows of stay stitch, 1 1/4 inch away, 1 1/2 inch away from notch to notch. This is the front. And also I serge the edges of the back. This has to be ironed out, but I serge the 2 back pieces. And now I'm going to pin right sides together. Up until this notch, so that you still can get the shirt, the tunic on. So I'm just going to tack it here and then go back to the sewing machine. So that's the back and this is the front. So what you have to do in the front is, on the wrong side, you take 1 row of the string and you pull. Actually you pull both of them together, if you can see. So if you can see, you can take both rows on the wrong side and you pull. So this is the gather that's in the front at the collar. So you're pulling both strings on the wrong side. So you're probably going to have to let some of this out, but you get the idea. So now you have the gather that's in the front. Now we're going to sew the back together and attach at the shoulders. Okay, so we sewed the front and back together at the shoulder, and I serged the edges and I pressed it towards the front. I also sewed the back together and I pressed it open, including the part that was left open, and you stitch it 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. So now the front and back are attached, and now we have to add the collar. So now we put the collar together, right sides together. And you stitch along the shortest edge, the top edge. So I'll just pin it in place. And once you stitch it, everything is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, by the way. So you stitch it along the top edge, then you open it and you stitch along one side about a 1/16 inch away from the edge. And I'll show you what that looks like after I sew this up. So I sewed the collar together, and then I stitched on the non-fused side a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge, so that when you fold it over, you get a clean edge. So it rolls nicely. So now what you have to do is sew the edges down here and then attach it to the next seam. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Okay, now I have the collar pressed down and finished on both sides. So I'm going to attach it to the front and back at the neck. So you attach it with the right side without the stitching at the top to the right side of the neck. So I'm gonna match the front notch here, only pinning one side. Match the front notch to the center front. Then match the other collar notch to the neck seam notch at the front. So you might have to let out some of the gathering here so that it matches. You just go around and you pin, matching up the back on one side to the edge. So make sure it says edge, edge. Remember, you're just pinning one side of the collar, so you ease in everything else. Okay, so that's one side of the collar. The other side of the collar has an extension where the notch is, and this is the overlap for the button. So you match the notch, and then you pin everything else in. Okay, so now that you have everything all pinned, and you see this like a excess, this is for the button. Everything else is pinned, then you sew it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now that I sewed the collar seam, if you can see, now you have to finish the inside. I skipped a step. I didn't fold this down and iron it before I put this on, but it doesn't matter. You can just fold it under at the seam where you see the stitching, fold it over, and then pin. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew along this line so that you get a clean finish inside and a clean finish on the outside of the collar. So I'm just going to continue pinning this up, as you see, and then I'm going to sew it. So you just continue pinning along the stitch line until you get to the overhang where the button goes, and you just make sure that it's folded and you get a nice clean finish. You have to cut all the strings after. You can do that later. What I like to do is fold it so that it's clean and then stitch it along this line. I usually like to stitch on the outside so you can get a clean finish, but make sure when you sew that you're catching the edge of this. After that, we're going to attach the sleeve at the armhole. After that, we're going to hem the bottom at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, fold it twice, do the front and the back the same way, and you sew it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So I like to fold it at a 1/2 inch and press it, and then fold it again at a 1/4 inch. This way you get a clean finish here. Okay, now I did hem the bottom at a 1/4 inch. That's the back, and this is the front. I also attached the sleeve. So now we're going to pin the front to the back, matching the underarm seam. And once you finish this seam, you're gonna sew the seam and then finish it with the serger or zigzag stitch, however you finish your seams. And then we're going to do a stay stitch at the bottom of the sleeve. So it's going to be 2 rows of stay stitch, just like we did the collar. And then we're going to add the cuff. Okay, so I sewed the side seam and the underarm sleeve seam, and I serged the edges. So now it's a clean finish for the hem. And now we have to gather the bottom of the sleeve. I sewed 2 stay stitch on the widest stitch. So you take both rows of thread, the ends of both rows of thread, and then you pull together. What I like to do is put a pin at the notch so I don't lose it when it's time to pin the cuff to the edge of the sleeve. So you just pull. This can be adjusted later on, but you just want to gather all of this so that it fits the cuff. So now you have the gather for the sleeve. So here's the cuff. I sewed both edges together and left this part unsewn between the 2 circles so that we can put the elastic in. So when you attach the cuff to the bottom of the sleeve. You have to make sure that it's right side to right side, and the part that you did not sew is at the bottom. So when you fold it over, it's on the inside of the cuff and you can put the elastic through. And then you match the other notch in the middle of the cuff here, and then when we pinned it here. So you just ease out the gathers so that it fits the cuff. And make sure the gathers are as even as possible. So now the cuff fits the gathers, and you can pin this. So now you sew the cuff to the bottom of the sleeve. And you do that for both sleeves. Okay, so I sewed the cuff to the sleeve, and I folded the edge of the cuff 1/2 inch, and I pressed it. So now what you have to do is just fold the cuff, match the seam, and then you pin. So you match the fold line and you just put it slightly over the stitch line so that when you sew it on the right side, it catches. So I'm going to sew this on the right side at the seam, but it has to catch underneath so that it catches this, so it sews down flat. So you do this to both sides, to both cuffs. Okay, so once all of this is pinned down and you sew it on the right side of the fabric, then the hole that was left open is where you put the elastic. And once you put the elastic in, you have to just hand stitch this close. So the elastic was 1/2 yard, and I'm going to cut it in two, one for each cuff. So now the cuff is sewn. It's a clean finish on the right side, and it catched the cuff on the other side. So now you have the elastic, the safety pin, and now you're gonna put it through the channel. So once you pull it all the way through, make sure it's flat, and then you're going to sew this down and ease in all of this. So now that I stitched the elastic about 1/4 inch away from the edge, I ease it in to the cuff. So make sure it's just even all the way around and that it's all the way in. So once that's done, you just tack this down hand sew this down. So of course you have to cut off all the loose threads. So now you just have to put on your button on the extension in the middle, So you sew on your button here, if you can see that. And then you'll just put your buttonhole about 1/4 inch away from the other side in the middle of the collar. And then you're done. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be notified when the next video is available. I'll see you soon. This is Zahia from Cover Me Chic, making modest fashion look fabulous on you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.